It's time now for French Connections, our weekly look at the intricacies of life here in France with Florence Villeminot. Hi, Flo.
Hey, Jeannie.
So today we are going to focus on France's appetite for nuclear energy. France, of course, is one of the most nuclear-dependent countries in the world, and nuclear power is the anchor of France's national energy strategy, an energy system that's often cited as both a success story and a source of ongoing debate.
That's right, and France really is a powerhouse with an impressive nuclear fleet, second biggest in the world, only to the United States. So let's take a look. It counts 57 nuclear reactors across 19 power plants. You can see this map here. They're all operated by EDF. So EDF is Électricité de France, the national electric utility company, fully owned by the French government. Now, France really is, in France, nuclear energy is the leading source of electricity, and you can see it here. It counts for 70% of electricity in France. This is one of the highest shares in the world, and France uses its nuclear energy at home and also exports it to other European countries. France is actually the largest net exporter of electricity and gains over 3 billion euros a year from this. So the nuclear industry is really big in France. More than 200,000 jobs depend directly or indirectly on it, so it's really intricately linked to the French economy.
And France's relationship with nuclear power goes back centuries. In fact, French scientists are credited with discovering natural radioactivity.
They sure are. The nuclear scientists Henri Becquerel and Pierre and Marie Curie shared the 1903 Nobel Prize in Physics for their discovery of radioactivity. But to understand France's current reliance on nuclear energy, you have to go back to the 1970s, and in particular, the 1973 oil crisis, which really hit France hard. Why is that? Well, at the time, most of France's electricity came from foreign oil because France doesn't really have much in terms of domestic fossil fuel resources. So at the time, the government decided to enact something called the Mesmer Plan. So this was named for the prime minister at the time, Pierre Mesmer, without public or parliamentary debate. So this was a very ambitious nuclear power program aimed at introducing homemade nuclear power on a massive scale. And it went really fast. Within 2 decades, dozens of reactors were constructed. So there was this slogan at the time, France doesn't have oil, but we do have ideas. Now, at the time, it must be said, a lot of people were skeptical and scared, but others say that the economic fallout of this for their local economy really changed their lives for the better, and not just because electricity became cheaper.
Nous refusons l'industrie nucléaire parce qu'elle est dangereuse. Nous posons le problème du point de vue moral.
On n'avait pas de trottoir, on n'avait rien. C'était vraiment 100% campagne. Après, on a eu l'école maternelle, après on a eu la garderie, après on a eu la cantine, après il y a la galerie marchande.
So France has always seen nuclear power not simply as a means of energy production, but as a strategic pillar of sovereignty.
Yeah, and this is something that comes up a lot, especially if there is an energy crisis, for instance, in the wake of the war in Ukraine or more recently following unrest in the Middle East. So France's nuclear strategy has really reshaped its place in the world in a lot of ways, making it more independent than other European countries, like, for instance, Germany, which relies on Russian gas for its electricity. That being said, it's really important to distinguish between electricity and energy because nuclear accounts for 20% of France's total energy consumption, while oil and gas still account for 60%. So we're not completely independent. And also, France relies on other countries to import uranium to fuel this nuclear energy. So that's those are some of those issues. But coming back to the pro-nuclear camp, one other issue that comes up a lot is that it is a clean energy source. Nuclear power produces relatively little greenhouse gases, and advocates say that this is really an important ally in the fight against climate change and making good on French commitments to international climate treaties like the Paris Agreement.
Now, if a majority of the French population is in favor of nuclear energy, there's still a lot of concerns about nuclear waste.
That's right, and critics say that clean energy is a myth, a nuclear myth, because what about the future? High-level waste remains dangerous for thousands to hundreds of thousands thousands of years. Now, back in the day, we used to throw nuclear waste into the ocean, but now we bury it deep underground. But a lot of people say, how can you guarantee that this is going to be safe in the next 100 or hundreds of thousands of years? It really poses almost an ethical, generational problem, because you're kind of kicking the problem down the road for future generations. It's almost a philosophical dilemma, too, because, how do you signal that there is going to be a nuclear, risk of nuclear waste to future generations? We don't even know what language they'll be speaking. Now, in the more immediate future, there's also the risk of accidents. And public trust was really shaken in France following the 1986 Chernobyl disaster, when French authorities were criticized for misleading the public when they claimed that the fallout conveniently stopped at the French border. And more recently, there was Fukushima in 2011. So all these things really kind of shook people's confidence. But other people say that, risks are just part of life.
Vous connaissez beaucoup d'activités humaines qui n'ont pas de risque. Donc effectivement, mais vaut mieux des risques un peu forts et bien maîtrisés que des risques faibles et pas du tout maîtrisés comme on voit un peu partout.
So on top of the dilemma of radioactive waste and the risk of accidents, France's nuclear infrastructure is aging.
That's right. The fleet is getting old. Many of France's reactors are over 40 years old. Remember, they were built quickly in the 70s and 80s. So there's been a lot of hope and hype put into newer models of nuclear reactors like this one, the EPR, the European Pressurized Reactor, that we talk a lot about in France. But they have been proven to be lengthy and expensive to put into place. So time and time again, there have been calls, and sometimes political efforts even, to scale back the share of nuclear within France's energy strategy and to focus on renewable energy like wind and solar. But people who are in favor of nuclear energy say that these renewable energy sources, well, the grid is unreliable and too dependent on the weather. So in a world where it seems like there is no perfect energy solution, France, is betting big on nuclear and seems to keep doubling down on the fact that nuclear really is the backbone of its energy strategy.
Flo, thank you so much for taking that closer look at France's nuclear energy. That's all the time we have for this French Connections. Be sure to check out our previous episodes on the website, france24.com, or tweet Flo at Flo Vilmanot.